Welcome to Mr. Lamb Science Corner. Today's element is sodium. The symbol is Na, and of the elements we've looked at so far, most of them have pretty well been, hydrogen is H, helium is He, oxygen is O, but that's not the way it is all around the world. For example, in Germany, oxygen is known as Sauerstoff, but it still uses the symbol O. Nitrogen is Stickstoff. And all around the world, we use the same symbols because it makes it convenient for people to talk at conventions to each other instead of trying to say, now, what symbol does this mean? What does this mean? You know, but they call them by the different names according to their language. And the reason for that is that way back when they were discovering elements at a fast pace, they had a guy who said we need to come up with some kind of commonality to do this, and he proposed that the symbols come from the names given in Latin. Word for sodium is sodium in the English language, natrium in Latin, and so natrium Na, you can see the connection there. We have a number of those. We have iron is Fe because it's ferrum. Potassium is K because it's kalium. And so we have a lot of commonality between English and Latin, but it's not an identity. It's not a one-to-one thing. So some of the symbols, I just tell my students, you got to gut it up and learn it. No, you can't say you know chemistry if you don't know at least most of the symbols. I mean, there are some that dysprosium, if you want to, you don't use it very often. So if you want to say, I need to look that one up every once in a while, feel free to do so. But certainly, sodium is Na. That's one you need to know. It's very commonly used. Okay, so atomic weight 11, and the atomic number is 11. Atomic weight is 23.0. So the most common isotope is sodium 23. Okay? Discovered by Sir Humphrey Davy in 1807. You'll hear his name because when they in working to trying to find elements, they would come up with new pieces of equipment. We talked last time about neon, and basically Ramsay took air and liquefied it and then boiled it off in specific steps so he could discover new elements. And so that worked to find certain elements. Sir Humphrey Davy used a spectroscope to discover elements, and that's going to find a number of elements there. So we're going to see his name listed here. There's sodium right there, and so lithium and then sodium and potassium, all of these are known as the alkali metals, and hydrogen really isn't quite part of that. So it's in the same column. It has some commonality with the other elements, but it's certainly different enough to where you kind of sort of put this doesn't show it, but a lot of the periodic tables will leave a little bit of a gap between hydrogen and lithium, and to indicate that really hydrogen is pretty much by itself. Okay? It's highly reactive with water. There's a video out there to where they were trying to knock down the acidity of this one pond that they pumped water out of a mine back east, and it was very, very acidic, and so one way of turning alkaline or a little more towards the increase the pH to some extent is hucking a bunch of sodium in it. So they got pounds of this sodium and were hucking it in, and why they didn't hurt themselves, I don't know, but they apparently did okay. But it made some really nice explosions. It really did, including one that would explode and then a bunch of it would survive and it fell back down in the water and it explode and explode and explode and explode. So very fun to watch by video. I don't know if I'd want to be there because as it's bouncing around, what keeps it from bouncing back to you is the thought that goes through my mind. It's an essential element. It has kind of a bad reputation. People, eat sea salt instead of regular salt because this way they reduce the sodium, and that's really a good thing. But one thing that's not noticed in all the hoopla is that sodium is essential for life. You've got to have some sodium in your diet, or you'll die. Uh, Too much sodium in your diet, you'll die too. So go in moderation. But and we, and I include myself in this, tend to eat a little too much salt, or a lot too much salt. But you don't want to go without. Melts at 98 degrees Celsius. A story that goes that I love because it shows that you can cooperate even when you don't know the person's language or whatever. If we go back to World War II, the Japanese, of course, were creating the economic sphere, and they were trying to take over things, and they were going towards Australia, and one of the staging grounds was New Guinea, which is just north of Australia. And they took over most of New Guinea, but of course the natives there they didn't like that too much. And so they were rather basic people, and at the time they were headhunters, and they ate people. The Japanese soldiers really didn't like that because they would look for their friend and wouldn't find them, and turned out they ate them. So they made a deal with the tribesmen in New Guinea. Basically, they said, "You're eating us. We don't like that. We want you to stop. To encourage you to stop, we're going to cut off your access to the ocean. You're not going to have any salt." And in New Guinea, it rains a lot, so the soil was very depleted of sodium. And so they basically had went for a while with no salt whatsoever. And when that happens, you develop a really salt hunger, and you know you need, your body is screaming for, I gotta have salt. And it got to the point to where the tribesmen made a deal with the Japanese soldiers. They said, "We'll stop eating you. You give us access to salt." And the Japanese soldiers basically said, "Well, that's what we wanted in the first place," and so that was the deal that they made. Now, when the Australians, of course, were trying to take back New Guinea from the Japanese, and the Americans jumped in on that as well, I'm not really sure what they did. I think we started in New Guinea that we did with some of the other islands, to where we would give them food, and of course American food is going to have some salt in it, especially Spam and things like that, and so they didn't get the salt hunger in our areas, and I don't think they made the deal, but certainly we could have. But anyway, you can get, if you have no salt whatsoever, you can get so hungry for salt that you're going to want to do just about anything to get it, is the story, even including stop eating people. Okay? with that happy thought, we'll say goodbye till the next time.